So today is about a presentation on the strength and conditioning programs for a disabled athlete. So today we're looking at cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is an injury to the developing brain before, during, or soon after birth. It is usual to cause cerebral palsy. Various forms of cerebral palsy can be caused by damage to different areas of the brain, which can cause problems with balance, coordination, and motor control, which is a result from a brain injury. It is well known to impair someone's muscular control, and in certain situations, it can impair someone's ability to swallow, breathe, control their bladder, and/or manage their bowels, as well as create digestive issues. There are three main types of cerebral palsy, and it is known that cerebral palsy affects 2 to 3 out of every 1,000 births. The three main types of CP are spastic cerebral palsy, dyskinetic cerebral palsy, and ataxia cerebral palsy. Spastic cerebral palsy is where the muscles are tight and inflexible, making it challenging to move and limiting the range of motion that is feasible, particularly when they are moving fast. Approximately 80% of CP sufferers have spasticity. The tone of their muscles are higher in those with spastic CP. As a result, their motions may be uncomfortable due to their rigid muscles. Dyskinetic cerebral palsy is because the section of the brain is injured. People with dyskinetic CP have frequent changes in muscular tone that can produce shaking, or muscles that alternately switch between stiffness or floppiness and have involuntary movements or spasms. Ataxia cerebral palsy means that someone has got trouble with coordinating their muscles to do something. Someone with ataxia CP may walk with their feet slightly apart, and their gait may appear jerky or off balance. They may be unable to instruct their muscles to perform additional tasks, such as reaching for a fork. Speech and swallowing may be affected in ataxia. It is frequently referred as scanning speech, where ataxia impairs speaking, and the person employs a monotone voice with a breathy sound. And there is occasionally strange accelerations or pauses between their phrases. CP affects bodies in different ways, and certain ways of the body. Sometimes CP will affect some limbs or all limbs, sometimes just upper or just lower. You have a quadriplegia, which is a form of both arms and legs are affected. Diplegia, which is both legs are affected, or hemiplegia, which means one side of the body, so one arm and one leg is affected. And then looking into ataxia for today's presentation. So the main characteristics of that is loss of balance and coordination, and we're going to be looking into how that affects sport and how things can be changed for an athlete. So ataxia CP, there are athletes across a wide range of sports such as track and field, basketball, skiing, but many other sports such as football or swimming. All of these can be played at different levels and are all events within the Paralympics. They are broken down into different classifications depending on the athlete's level of CP. There are 8 different classifications with CP, which is designed by the ISRA. So the classifications are made up of 8 classes, which is designed by the ISRA organisation system. So CP1 through to CP8. These are classes that are very broad and are divided into three categories, so upper wheelchair, wheelchair, and ambulatory. So upper wheelchairs go under class CP1, whereas already ordinary wheelchairs fall under classes CP2, CP3, and CP4, and CP5, CP6, CP7, and CP8 or ambulatory. Some sports may have different classifications, but the ones here apply to all sports with disabled athletes. So other sports may go into more specific detail about the disability and how that affects them as a person. Athletics has been in the Paralympics since 1980 and was the first time in the Netherlands Paralympics. Cerebral palsy athletes make up a huge amount of athletes within the Paralympics back in 1980s and now in 2020 in the 2000s, as we call it. In 1992, the Summer Paralympics, it was made official that the classifications were to change to integrated classifications instead of 4 different ones based on their disability. However, some say this is a disadvantage to CP athletes, as they may come up against someone who matches their classification but may not match the characteristic of like loss of balance or loss of coordination. So this mostly happens in swimming but can happen across all sports. They put them into classifications as it is there for them to compete fairly against one another, and athletes with other impairments and sports that involve participants at varying degrees of cerebral palsy. So it's allowing them to always be with someone kind of at the same level as them. So finally, we're going to look at adaptation. So on the screen, as you can see, you have like demonstrations, changes in equipment, changes when moving around the facilities, adaptation to certain exercises, limited range of movement, weather conditions, or sometimes even hearing or visual impairments. So athletics is mainly track events, is a high demanding sport and involves strength, speed, and power. So this is just one example of changing kind of exercises and adapting. When training, the majority focus will be on the lower body. So athletes with acticia CP will have some effect on the lower body. When training in the gym, for example, looking at a barbell squat, the weight needs to be comfortable for the athlete and make sure there's always a spotter there just in case of loss of balance. However, you can move it onto a Smith machine to allow the athlete to feel a lot more independent, but make sure there is always some support there for them. Some athletes with CP may have hearing or visual impairments, so having good communication is something that needs to be very important. So both verbally and visually is in order so the athlete is carrying out an exercise correctly and safely. A slower reaction time can be a common effect of CP, so being calm and patient with the athlete is important, as they are at a disadvantage to normal able-bodied athletes. The weather in the winter can cause issues for CP athletes, meaning that training will need to be adapted to an inside setting. This could be a different indoor space completely to what the athlete is used to. So moving around a new facility is something that needs to be remembered, and working in new environments can always be an issue. Many CP have limited range of movement, therefore they're not at their optimum performance. So support will be needed to help them move into that position to reach their optimum performance. Looking at the adaptations we've just spoke about, it is important to think about all of these, but it does depend on the athlete. getting to know your athlete is something that is really important with disabled athletes, as every disabled athlete is different, just like every able-bodied athlete is different. So some things work for some things don't. But making adaptations to their training program will allow for them to feel more comfortable and feel like they are making progress in their training, as well as reaching their optimum performance in order to gain high level in sports, or to gain higher so they can gain higher levels in sport and make sure they are gaining their full potential.